It's great to have you join me on your news and current affairs program, Africa Discourse, where we look at strictly issues concerning Africa and how to better the lot of Africa in terms of the economy, making it buoyant, and the conflict challenges that we've been faced with as Africans, how to make government really viral in that aspect. And bringing about this, the essence of this topic that we'll be looking at is just to ensure that every energy from the African government is deployed into bringing about a boost in the economy. And we're looking at the global food crisis, Africa's preparedness. I'm your host on this edition, Philip Omo-Gupon, and I'll be speaking with both a business expert and economic experts, looking at the economies that we have before us today. That will be looking into the nitty-gritty of all of these challenges facing Africa as it pertains to food crisis in the world. And he is a lecturer in the University of Benin. He is an economist, like I did say, and he is Dr. Presley Osemige. Thanks for having you join me.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Philip, and a good afternoon, viewers.
All right, while this show progresses, we will also have the opportunity to speak with a business expert and also a politician, Fred Oyigwe. While we wait for that section to pop up, we're going to be looking at the nitty-gritty, like I did say, all of these issues concerning what food price should be like, you know, in terms of the challenges facing Africa. And the United Nations has estimated that in this year, there's going to be acute food prices increases, looking at even a point where there are 6.3 million of children will be malnourished. And that will be adding to the already existing 1.4 million children that are already malnourished. And also looking at the increase in wheat, increase in cereals. And the basic challenge here is that Ukraine and Russia, they are in a war, and these two countries happens to be the bread basket in terms of wheat and in terms of sunflower, and having these exports coming to Africa. This again is being hindered because of major ports in the Black Sea that have been shut down. But we're going to be analyzing this, how all of these effects are coming upon Africa, and what African governments should be doing in this regard. We'll take a short break, after which we expand the frontiers of this discussion. It's great to have you join me again. As we had a break, we had the opportunity to be joined by Fred Oyigwe. Fred Oyigwe is a politician and also a business expert. Good to have you join me, Fred.
Thank you very much, Mr. Philip, for having me.
All right, we've been faced as Africans, we've been faced with a challenge of the global food crisis, and there has been ways in which have been really put forward in ameliorating this challenge facing it. We have Ukraine, we have Russia basically at war with Ukraine, and Russia and Ukraine are really referred to as the world bread basket in wheat and sunflower. And we look at the major players who really export a lot, to Africa in order to bring a balance in the consumption of wheat and sunflower in Africa. This again is a threat. Now, we've not really recovered from the repercussions of the COVID-19 pandemic. That is still there, the consequences, the impact upon Africa. And African countries seems to be the worst hit, because whenever it comes to issues like this, the ripples effect, basically come upon our economy. You are an economist. How do you tackle this? What perspective are you seeing it from in terms of African preparedness in tackling all of these challenges?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Philip. Once again, good afternoon, viewers. The issue of global food crisis is not new to us at all. If you recall, in 2008, late 2007, in the first quarter of 2008, and second quarter as well, the globe, and as the world also experienced food, crisis. One of the major causes of that food crisis then was a result of droughts in some major producing, wheat producing countries of the world, and also due to the upsurge, the increase in oil prices. A lot was done during that period to mitigate and also to prepare Africa ahead of the global food crisis. Now, the recent one that was risen again by the pandemic, which we just experienced, and also more critically the war between Ukraine, and Russia, also, again created tension in terms of food, shortage in the world. Now, once there is gaps between demand and supply, when the supply is not meeting up the demand, there is bound to be gaps. And once that gap, is sustained and nothing is done to mitigate it or reduce it, over time, it will lead to what we call food crisis. And once that happens, there will be problem in the world. Now, let me come to your question now. How is Africa preparing, ahead of, the global food, crisis? Now, African leaders in the past have done so well. Now, let me limit to the African Development Bank. The former president of the African Development Bank, developed, TAT. TAT is technology for Africa, for agricultural, transformation. Okay. TAT was actually, it came into birth, with a specific agenda of ensuring and providing resources for African countries, to increase food production, especially in the area of wheat, again, maize, soya beans, and other cereals. Yeah. And again, if you come to think about the fact that wheat is a highly crop that is affected by temperature. That's why it's mostly grown in the area where there's relatively humid and very cold. Okay. That's why Russia and Ukraine, have the opportunity of producing them in large capacity. But if you come to Africa, due to our weather, the nature of our temperature, which is very high, yes, cannot be sustained. But however,
can't sustain much of it.
Yes. However, TAG, came up to develop what we call, the heat-resistant, seedlings, and TAG gave about 1.8 million farmers these, heat-resistant, seedlings, so they can improve a lot of their, farm produce.
And Nigeria happens to be part of this country.
Yes, 7 countries. We have, Sudan is there, okay. And again we have Zimbabwe is also there.
Is South Africa there?
South Africa is also there.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So they were actually to encourage to produce wheat, in large capacity, so to cover the gap between, demand and supply as a result of the war in Ukraine. I think Africa leader, again, apart from that, the Africa Development Transformation, agricultural transformation, has also been launched in several countries in Africa. Now, let me be more specific. Now, in Nigeria, the former president, Goodluck Jonathan, launched, the Africa, form of the transformation, whereby that gave birth to the Ola farm in Nasarawa, which happened to be one of the largest farms in the whole of, Africa. And that farm is saddled with the responsibility of producing, producing wheat. They can produce rice as well. They can produce other, crops. That's what was done in terms of Nigeria. And other African countries also follow suit. That's why today, Syria alone is the largest, contributor to GDP in Africa. They contribute about 61% to African GDP in 2021. And that follows again by, Chad. Again, we have Niger Republic is also there. And we have Nigeria. Nigeria, although regrettably, Nigeria is not among, the 10 countries. Nigeria appear to be, about 16 countries contributing to African GDP, about 24%.
Agri GDP.
Yes, agricultural GDP. Okay. About 24%.
Okay. You are a business expert, Fred Uyegwe. Now, you just heard his analysis. And despite the fact that there has been much ways to close in the gap, like he said about the former president of the AFDB, and all he did in order to bring about seedlings that would be highly resistant against climate conditions in order to survive in this part of Africa, the continent. Now, what do you make of these actions, by governments in Africa to sustain the growth of wheat, sunflower, or to bring about a near approximate to that which we observe in Ukraine and Russia? Is it possible?
First and foremost, we must consider what in economics you call comparative advantages.
Okay.
Okay. There are areas of products or produce where we have comparative advantage over the countries we import certain items from.
Oh.
For example, in the production of yam, tubers, or cassava, we have a comparative advantage over those that try to compete with us. So there is always that necessity to leverage on the areas where you have comparative advantage, because you can produce more. That is why those who grow wheat concentrate on wheat, because they do have comparative advantage in the production of a produce like, or a commodity like wheat. Okay. What we try to do, because over the process of time, food staples have transcended borders. Bread, before maybe the colonial era, was not a food staple to African nations or to Africa communities. But with colonization and the importation of wheat and bread and flour, it became a staple, replacing, not completely replacing, at least beginning to compete with local staples like yam and other staples that we already have. Yam, cassava, and all of that. So in order not to bleed ourselves of the foreign exchange that we need, there became a necessity for us to attempt to now grow some of these things that are not natural to the African climate, so that we do not spend too much on importation.
Yes, which
and
is
foreign exchange, which is important. It is strategic. But what we actually need to do, one, we need to look at those things that, or those products and commodities, those three categories: commodities, produce, and agri-products, where we have comparative advantage. And then we have to begin to look at mechanization. See, the problem here in Africa today is that we are still very much dependent on subsistent farming. Okay? And you don't produce too much. A mechanized system can produce several thousand times more per hectare and per time frame than the subsistent farmers can do. So that is why it is good for us to begin to train our people in mechanized skills, in the operation of equipment, farm equipment, so that we can transition from subsistent farming to mechanized farming. The advantages that the developed countries have, where we import some of these staples from, like wheat, sunflower, barley, and all of that, is because they operate mechanized systems of agriculture. For example, as far back as 1978, right about the time I was doing my A-levels program.
Okay.
Okay. The United States had just about 2% of its population back then engaged in agriculture.
Just 2%?
Just 2%. Okay? And Nigeria probably had about 60, 70%.
Wow.
If not more.
Wow.
Okay? The difference is in mechanization of agric production. But recently, that figure has even reduced to 1%.
You mean the mechanized?
No, I mean in the United States.
Okay.
Those engaged in agriculture, has reduced to 1%. And their produce has increased.
Because of the mechanized
The
farming.
production, yes, and their production has increased.
Okay.
Because of the mechanization process. So that is something we need to embrace and aggressively pursue so as to change the narrative. Then there's something else that we must consider: preservation and packaging.
That's quite
Okay.
a long way.
There's a lot of spoilage that come with the harvesting of produce and agric produce.
Yeah.
A lot of spoilage because there are no preservation mechanisms to preserve these excesses that we have. You can harvest a lot of tomatoes today, but we know within a short time they are going to go bad. So you have to have storage systems where you package them and help their shelf life, or to lengthen their shelf life. Where the shelf life might have been a week, it can be extended to as much as a month or two. And that also gives you an opportunity to be able to process them into agric products that will now even enjoy longer shelf lives, 2-3 years, like in tomato pastes and tomato puree. These are things we need to look at. And we have had opportunities to do this. We have the resources to do it. It's just that we are not looking in that direction, and it beats me hollow why we are not.
It really beats me hollow.
Because, packaging, for example.
Yeah.
When we are talking about unemployment in Nigeria, we have not even begun to package our agric produce, into units that are easy to transport and easy to preserve. That is a huge vacuum that we can draw on and we can leverage on to be able to employ our youths gainfully. And many of the techniques to package this produce are not extremely sophisticated. They are just a little bit above basic technology. Okay. So these are things, and they are affordable. Okay. So these are some areas we need to look at.
Okay.
Then there is also the issue of strategic food reserve policy. Okay. Because you know that there are going to be times when there will be natural disasters, when there will be unforeseen circumstances.
Yes, uncertainties.
Uncertainties. Then you have to attempt to store something and to store some of the food that you have that is excess.
I think that's what the Englishman calls saving for the rainy day.
Saving for the rainy day. So that strategic food reserve, all countries in the world have a policy for that. But you can only reserve so much if you can afford so much. Many countries cannot afford very huge reserves because they cannot really afford it. And besides, that affordability is not just the purchasing power alone, but the capacity to preserve what you have, what you want to try to reserve. Okay? So if you are not able to preserve it, you will not. It makes no sense, because if you buy it, it's going to go bad anyway.
Okay.
So
I must say that you did a lot in terms of revealing all of this about the mechanized process, the reserved policy concerning saving for the rainy day, like what the Englishman would call it, and of course the other aspect that has to do with preservation. Now, it beats me hollow, like he said, because developed countries are also in this squalor, or rather are also in this challenge, where the two countries that are known as the world bread basket, are in war, But despite that, the pinch is mostly felt by the African continent. And just before I asked, what are those developed countries doing that African countries aren't doing to make it robust in terms of production? He spoke about key elements in that. I don't know if that exhausts your list, or what more do you think Africa can do or Africans are not doing, to really break the gap?
Okay, thank you very much once again. In 2008, even currently, both the developed nations and the underdeveloped nations are both affected by this food crisis, or will be affected by this global food crisis. Okay. In 2008, the food crisis caused a lot of political and economic instability, and also added socio-economic unrest by all nations. An effort was therefore made by both the developed country to ensure they cushion the effect. That's why till up to 2016, if you see what is going on now, the trend is this: the effect of the aftermath of 2008 global food crisis is still manifesting somehow in a way. And the reason why it became so glaring, when the Ukraine and Russian war, started, because a lot of African countries, were not prepared, and they didn't learn their lessons from the 2008 global food crisis that happened. Now, what are the major challenges bedeviling most of African countries? Like he said, number one, we have the issue of land tenure system, whereby land is owned communally, and that will lead to what we call fragmentation of land. And people who wants to farm in a mechanized form, in a large capacity, will not have access to land. But again, that can be addressed through the Land Degree Act of 1978. That can be addressed, not that. Again, let me forget the issue.
The Land Degree Act of 1978, does it cover Africa?
76.
Or
1978.
76.
76?
Yes.
No, 78. Look at
Are
it.
you referring to what does it cover the continent?
No, that decree gave Africa, that gave government, access to land. That government can have access to land.
In Africa?
Yes, in Africa. Government can have access to land, so that to remove the barrier created by land fragmentation as a result of land tenure system that is existing. So people who wants to farm in a large, hectares of land can have access to land. Unlike the communal farm system, whereby there's just a fragment of land. And once, for example, if I'm interested in my village now, I want to farm in a mechanized, farming. I'm going to mechanized farming. I may not be able to have access to land because the land portion given to me as a result of my family can just be small. And again,
so that's a setback.
It's a serious setback in Africa. It's a serious setback until government will wake up to realization that they take over lands, and the government will start amassing land to people who are interested to go into farming, a large, system of farming. Hence, we can solve the problem. Having said that, apart from the issue of land tenure system, let's not forget the adaptive nature that be given to us by nature. The issue of drought. And Africa is an adaptive, country. We are adapted to global warming and other stuff we can think of.
And can we stand drought?
The issue of how do we stand drought? The issue of drought is this. That's why I said it came about as a result of the last global food crisis. And what it started doing, they are providing resources and again developing, heat-resistant seedlings to African countries. And are giving this seedling to African countries, also using low land and also irrigation, because wheat and maize, for example, you may try to know that Ukraine, is accounted for about 30% of wheat export to Africa. Also, Ukraine can also account for about 48% of wheat export to Africa. For Russia alone, that is about $4 billion annually. And again, for Ukraine, that's almost $3 billion as well.
And it's so painful that these countries are at war.
Yes. And the reason why we are feeling the impact, and the reason why the prices are increasing, is not only affecting wheat, it's also affecting fertilizer. Energy is also being affected. And again, once prices are increasing, there's every tendency that industrial our produce will also be affected. And the reason why Africa is receiving the brunt of all of this, because we depend so much on wheat, because our diet has changed. People are changing from the normal staple food as a result of, non-communicable disease. That people are now scared of diabetes and what have you. People are not going to changing their diet because we change a lot. And the reason why we are depending on Russia and Ukraine, for this, crop. Now, having said that, let me come back to that causes. Let's not forget the issue of, flooding. In 2012, Cape Town experienced huge flooding. That's South Africa, which affected the economic. A lot of arable farmland and settlements, yes, were swept, by flooding. Again in Nigeria, in that same 2012.
And there can't be a control over that.
No, you can never say Africa is only adaptive to all these, climate changes. It was brought upon us by nature. We can do little or nothing. But if our government is being proactive, they can address a lot. Again, like I was saying, in 2012,
Are you saying that nature can be tackled?
It
can kind of ameliorate these challenges.
Yeah, it can.
Because even the developed countries have been exposed to various hurricanes.
Even recently, U.S. and wildfire is still going on.
Yes, and that seems not to diminish their economy.
No.
So, what are they doing that we aren't?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's all about consciousness. If our leaders have this, consciousness.
Because he spoke about, reserving, as in policies, bringing out policies,
I'm going to come to that. How many African countries can actually engage in food reserves when there's no facility, to store food? How many African countries? A lot of wastages are going on daily basis.
I think the aspect of proactiveness also counts.
That's what I'm saying, yeah. They will have this consciousness.
Yeah. Okay, I'll come back to you. Now, you spoke about mechanized process of agriculture. Now, did this also occur to you that most Africans, live in poverty, and they may not have the wherewithal, to buy equipment, to make a mechanized process possible? Aren't you thinking about that?
I wrote a report that I tagged, I think, 2000, 2 years in 2000. 2 years 2000.
2 years 2000.
Yes. What that report was about is the introduction of mechanized farming to subsistence farmers. That in 2 years, the subsistence farmers of today in Nigeria can increase their yield by 2,000% because of the introduction of mechanized farming. See, there is large-scale mechanized farming. There is medium-scale mechanized farming. And there is small-scale mechanized farming.
In those proportions?
In those proportions. See, there are some basic tools, hand-pushed machines, farm equipment, plows and harrow, harvesters and planters, hand-pushed, that are not expensive and that are affordable. But our subsistence farmers are not familiar with these things. They are not exposed to them. They need somebody, or they need a system that will expose them to it and then train them in the use of this equipment so that they can begin to, and then even help finance it for them because they are not expensive. It's, for example, I will digress a little bit. Okay? We go around our streets wanting to inflate our car tires when they are low with vulcanizers. But for over 40 years, I can say for over 40 years, because 42 years ago when I go to the United States, they were not inflating tires the way we do it now. They had advanced, they have changed that 42 years ago.
Yeah.
And today we are still doing what we are doing.
Exactly.
And
we have not improved.
you cannot, you see, you can inflate 50 tires in the time space that we inflate one here.
That's why they call these countries developing countries. But I wonder when to leave that developing stage to develop.
The thing is this: the equipment they are using, is it affordable to our own vulcanizers, for example?
Big question.
Yes, big question. And I will say yes, because some of our vulcanizers, I know many of our vulcanizers who have homes, who built their houses for several times the amount that they could have used to buy such equipment. That is the same thing with farmers.
Okay, but how readily available are these equipment?
Those equipment are available. There's no restriction from purchasing.
How subsidized by government are they?
They don't even without subsidy, they are affordable. But what we need is the correct policy, the right policy to expose our farmers to these equipment.
But don't forget, what you call affordable may be different from what the other man calls affordability.
I call it affordable. I call it affordable
because that could be relative.
No, sir.
That could be relative.
When I say affordable,
yeah,
I'm comparing it to the expenditure, the average expenditure of equivalent artisans or operators of such systems. If a farmer is able to, in 6 months of planting cassava, I have interacted with a whole lot of them, buy a car, just from maybe 2 hectares of cassava planting. Buy a car, a second-hand car, yes, fairly used. Then you wonder why he will not spend that money in buying equipment that can help him produce 10 times that amount.
So mindset is another challenge that we are faced with.
The thing is exposure. You have to have a policy that, look, it's not just enough to pass our children through schools with set curriculums and all that. The practicality of what they need to do counts a lot. What people are exposed to, I bet you, if you expose them properly to these alternative means of income earning, you will not have children on the streets. You will not have people running around the streets.
Okay, thank you.
What we are talking about is increasing the efficiency of production.
Okay, thank you. I'll come back to you. Now, year in, year out, you are a lecturer in the University of Benin, and I think we should use graduates as a case study in the agriculture, Now, year in, year out, graduates are poured out, and most of these graduates seem not to be doing what they were taught in school. How do we fill that lapse? How do we fill that gap? Because I think a huge percentage of bringing wealth or boosting production are in a lot of graduates that are not doing what they should be doing.
Because the opportunities are not there.
Mr. Philip, thank you very much.
Let's hear you out.
Our greatest problem is what we call systemic problem. We have systemic challenges. Most of our programs are not designed to favor, some certain persons. Wow. Like my colleague was saying, when it comes to the issue involving importation alone, do you know the stress? Getting clearance from customs, do you know the stress? Only in Nigeria, you have to bribe your way through so many, offices and channels. The problem that we bring upon you alone will discourage you not to do some certain things. Now let me come to the question you asked. Yes, we have graduates, we produce graduates year in, year out. Now let's not forget the fact that these graduates are just students who just graduated. They don't have access to credit facility.
That's a challenge.
Because for you to engage in mechanized farming, you need huge capital.
He said they can be in various proportions, like the small scale.
And even the small scale, even the localized, let me use the word.
The small scale.
Yes, you still need capital, you need capital to acquire land.
I think that's where he said
they are
affordable. The equipment are affordable.
Capital to buy fertilizer. Do you know fertilizer are so very, very expensive? I must let you know. Even the so-called the one that is being provided by government to our farmers. How many truly gets to these farmers?
Okay, but can't fertilizers be produced locally? what's the essence of going through school and then yet agriculturalists are not able to produce fertilizers?
The raw materials. Yeah,
yes.
We won't come to in fertilizer production. We have what called raw materials.
Yeah.
There are some chemicals that need to be combined to get some certain amount of fertilizer produced.
Then you
For
combine
example,
these chemicals.
you still need them. You still need some component from overseas.
Okay.
You still need some component. That's why thank God for this Dangote fertilizer plant that is in Nigeria now. It's the largest in the whole of Africa. Thank God it's in Nigeria. But still, Dangote is saying that fertilizer will also be purchased at the same rate, global rates in the world. In other words, if it is $5 per ton, that's what an average in Nigeria will also pay to procure such fertilizer. The question that comes to mind is, see, capital is a huge challenge. Let's not hide from that. That's why I said, again, I talked about our land tenure system. It's also a huge challenge. Again, the issue of infrastructure, amenities are not longer in the villages that will encourage our youth, our graduates to go back to village and farm.
I think that's where the government comes in.
Yes, if government develop these rural areas and make them comfortable, there are social amenities, there's life there. A lot of people go back to their villages and engage in agricultural, engage in farming. Okay. But again, there's no life in the villages. That's why people are coming back to urban city to have access to the urban life. It's a huge challenge. Not until government will consciously plan. It's going to be a long-term plan. They will plan, consciously plan, and ensure that graduates from the agricultural, faculties are giving the equipment, they are giving the support, the necessary, facility. There's no hindrance or limit to resources. Without that, we will not get it right. There will still be food. You see, we are going to face huge food crisis in the long run if in the short run the necessary policies and conscious effort is not be done by government to tackle the gap.
Thank you. In case you're just watching, it's Africa Discourse, and I've been enjoying this. We've been enjoying this beautiful discussion, resourceful ideas coming from the lecturer at University of Benin, Dr. Presley Osemigye, and also the business expert and politician with us, who is Fred Oyigwe. And much has been said in this direction concerning the global food crisis, Africa's preparedness. But let's look at this. Fred, you are a businessman. And let's look at this. They say that government, actually, they are not good businessmen. But aren't there ways that the government can go into massive scale in terms of mechanizing the agricultural process in order to yield massive results?
Good. Very good question. I'll tell you, for those of us who lived through the administration of Dr. Samuel Osaibovo Ogbemudia, whom we still believe was a magician because he accomplished so much.
So much.
Okay? And that was all because he involved the government in many of those establishment of public companies. You see, I believe even up to now, the government is in the best position to establish businesses of all categories, especially big businesses.
Yeah.
Because for one, the issue of permitting will be removed. The issues of funding will be mitigated because the government can secure more funds, can borrow, can solicit some consolidated funding or financing for the projects.
Or
then the government, it's a strong guarantor.
Okay, but can the issues of corruption be removed?
So, listen, sir, I'm coming to all that.
Okay.
Government is not a good manager of businesses. I agree with that. But they are in the best situation to establish them. So having established, what the government should be doing is to have what I call a revolving privatization process.
Go.
You establish in 9 months to a year or to 18 months, you privatize. And use that money plus another one, then you establish 2.
Okay.
Establish 4.
Is that what we can also call the public-private partnership?
No.
Okay,
you are not partnering this time. You are privatizing, you are establishing and privatizing. You are turning it over to private hands. Let those who know how to manage business now run it. Haven't secured the establishment. That is what we should be doing. That's what we ought to have been doing. Just you.
We've not done this.
No, we are not done.
I cannot see any African country doing this.
I don't know about other African countries. I know that in Nigeria we are not.
We're not.
I don't know of any state that is doing it, and the federal government is not doing it.
Okay.
But I just want you to imagine, we have 774 local governments, councils in Nigeria. Okay, we have 36 states plus the Federal Capital Territory. If all of these were to go into a program such as I've just described, they establish one the first year. By 18 months, they are privatizing it and recovering that money. And then they now have the opportunity to establish two, because they have money to establish one new one, and the money they have recovered from the old one to establish two. The multiplier effect goes from 2 to 4 to 8 to 15. And
wonderful.
Before you know it, everybody is employed. It's no rocket science.
It's no rocket science,
The thing is,
it isn't as cheap as the way you are saying
it. It is as cheap.
Because you want to say it is another tool, really represent it practically.
It is as cheap.
Okay.
It's the willingness to do it. It's a process. It's called revolving investment.
Oh.
You know, you take it, you revolve it, then you multiply it, and people get employed, and then you are now going to have investors come who will now be looking at the viability of each of these new businesses, and will now begin to invest or divest or integrate. That's how it works. In the United States, they don't need something like that, because their credit system is robust. The private sector can access credit limitlessly almost, so long as they are credit worthy. There are small banks, not as big as this establishment, for example, that will advertise when you are driving across along streets in the US, that will loan up to $250 million to businesses. That's a lot of money.
Okay.
That can be used, because their credit system is robust. Here, our banks function more as deposit houses than as lending houses, until that transition takes place. And that transition can only take place that transition can only take place when the aggression of investment increases. And that aggression will take place when these governments try to establish these businesses and turn them over to private businesses that will become so robust that they cannot make demands of the banks.
Okay, let's look at, I think, I must confess, wonderful contributions from you and the doctor. Now, let's look at this aspect. He made mention of the preservative techniques that maybe some of these Africa countries are not really deploying. Now, let's look at the constraints that countries in Africa may be faced with in terms of bringing about preservative techniques. Do you see any?
Yeah, there's been a huge, serious challenge when it comes to the issue of, preservation. Most of our food produce in Africa, they are perishable, and you cannot actually store them over time. Now, getting, silos in huge, form will involve a huge capital. Let's not forget about that. Again, if you see in advanced countries today, they can even preserve meat, even as far as meat. They can dry meat, and that meat will stay for 6 months, even 1 year. There are some food preservatives which can also be preserved, like tin tomatoes, for example, can also be preserved, in abroad, in a can, and can last close to about, 6 to 1 year. Although there is this consciousness against, canned preserved food and all of that. But that doesn't give us or give African countries the yes not to go into preservatives. Okay. There's a lot they can do. Okay. When it comes to, I'm coming. Okay. Let me land. When it comes to the issue of, preservation, like when we talk about agriculture, it's not just involving only crops only. We have dairies also there, fisheries also there, and arable crops they're also there. No, there are different categories of preservative that can be used for Africans, that African government can, and have access to. But like I said, the truth about African is this: systemic and institutional failure has affected African leaders.
That's a mega setback.
in actually towing these lines. For example, in Nigeria, what does it take? Oga just made mention of establishing business. I was just smiling within me.
Yeah.
I was saying, Oga is talking, Oga Igwe is just talking from his own, being himself, being human, from his heart. How many government agencies can you give money to establish business and establish to a basic standard? When I mean to a higher standard that they will be willing to, privatize it. Give them this money. Yes, give them this money.
I think that's where corruption comes in.
Exactly. At the end of the day, they will not sell this same business to their family.
Yes, it's one thing for the government to have policies in that direction. It's another for the functionary of the government to divert.
Because we have
different adjectives.
Look, you cannot. Excuse me, sir. You cannot, because of the excuses. You can give excuses for not coming to work on any particular day. Okay, you can think about the weather, how it's going to be. You can think about the traffic, how it's going to be, or your clothes, whether they are ironed or not. But you have to overcome all of that.
But excuse
me, sir. Once you say this is our challenge, this is the challenge we want to overcome, then all the objections to realizing it, you treat all of them. You are not going to exhaust all because you do not know all. Okay? But as it goes, you improve on them. Over time, we will have a more perfect system of establishing and privatizing.
Okay.
Now, to contribute to what you were saying about preservative techniques. I worked for 2.5 years in a produce company in the United States, from which I paid my school fees as a student. Okay? Most of the preservation we did was by refrigeration. Okay? Refrigeration, the equipment needed to refrigerate. Two things. Only
electricity supply.
Only two things. Excuse me, sir. I'm coming to that. I knew we raised that. Yes. Preservation. You need a cooling unit, which is just like your AC unit.
Yeah.
All the vehicles we were using, all were refrigerated vehicles.
Wow.
Because there's an AC kind of, or a cooler, which is an AC kind of system. There are homes here where people have 5-10 ACs in their homes, and then they go away to work, and nobody's using them. They can use money for 2 of them to buy a cooling system in a van that will preserve food for a year or even more. Those things have lifespan of about 14-15 years. I worked in an AC company, so I know what the lifespan of those things are.
Okay.
So we are talking about electricity.
It's a major challenge in Africa.
If you do not agree with me, I don't think you will disagree with me by too much if I say that Nigeria electricity capacity is 50 to 60% privately provided, because we all have generators. You use generators. If we are using generators already for other industrial processes or industrial production, the same generator you are going to need. If you have a room like this, or 2, 3, 4 rooms like this, you have one heavy-duty generator, 100 kVA, 200 kVA, 250, 300 or 500 kVA outside.
Okay.
You are going to be able to refrigerate everything you store in this whole building.
Okay, thank you. I think the onus really lies in government to take action. Now, the government in Africa should take action, should wake up. And what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, the war, the Cold War,
has exacerbated.
Yes, it's an opportunity. It's a wake-up call for Africa as a continent, to wake up to the challenges and find a way to be proactive. We just have to be proactive. We must leave the stage we are in. But let's look at this aspect, because we are wrapping up, and I'll just give you this for 1 minute to react to the aspect of insecurity that could also bedevil farmers accessing their farmlands. Isn't this also a setback?
Yeah, so it's a serious setback. I think once before now, I think here in this studio, I talked deeply on the effect of insecurity on our farmers. You know, a lot of people have been denying, access to their farmland as a result of insecurity. Communal clashes, even in Taraba, you see, clashes between one community and the other. The issue of kidnapping and banditry is there, and all of them are going to be. And let's not forget the issue of ISIS.
We still have politicians. We still have politicians running for positions, and when they get in positions,
and ISIS
we still have
gradually coming into Africa. Okay. And again, this is going to affect food production and food supply, and that will lead to huge inflation.
Okay. I think I want you to also expound on it.
Let me tell you this. We are talking about insecurity. Those who perpetuate crimes because they believe that they have something to gain today, do so because they know that in gainful employment or in gainful businesses, they will not make as much as what they realize from crime. Seriously? But when tomorrow they realize that they can get more from gainful businesses than crime, they will not participate in crime. That is the onus. That is what the government should drive the people to understand. I like to use the United States as my example. Okay, millionaires are made every day in technology. Some of these boys who are graduating from our schools today, they don't want to go into kidnapping. The smart ones don't want to go into kidnapping. They are going into music. They are going into movie industries. They are going into technology. And many of them are making much money than the ones who choose to engage in those crimes. Because they know.
Why some smart ones who would have
done very well,
in other areas.
They are using for this
reasons. They are using for fraud.
So they are using because the orientation is wrong. See, we need to change their orientation. Because some of them are today, I will say this,
all right.
using more brain power and more technology, more brain power and less technology.
Okay, thank you.
To create to earn their fraudulent income.
Okay.
Than what was used to establish Facebook and.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Phillips, the issue of institutional failure must be addressed in all of these.
Of what failure, sir?
Institutional failure.
Institutional failure.
Yes, in Nigeria. Yeah. And in some part of Africa.
In government.
Generally, not until we address that.
Okay.
If the environment is not conducive for these bandits and all these people who carry their nefarious activities, come on, they will stop this. Because the environment is so friendly with them. They can do all of this.
The final thing I want to just mention is its internship.
Okay.
What we had back then in the 70s was that students had the opportunity to go for interns for a year.
I think we're going to have like a phase 2 of this discussion. It's quite awesome to have you join me. A big thanks for taking out the time to really expound on this, Fred Oyigwe, and big thanks to you, Dr. Presley Osemije, for taking out time. Well, there's so much we can take. I know you would have even loved us to continue, but we'll do this on the next one. Goodbye.